So the death rates here. Yeah. We've talked about this before. Now we know that, for example, the fatality rates. Let me clarify. The total death numbers now.
Correct.
Let's look at those numbers because I do think that matters. But we know that the death rates are significantly lower. Does anybody remember? It was 4 to 7%.
Yeah.
And they reduced it to 2.
Yeah.
Now it's 0.5 total. And of course, if you are not over the average median age for someone who dies of coronavirus is older than life expectancy.
Yeah.
So if you're below life expectancy, it's significantly less than 0.5%.
You're gonna be fine.
But either way, it's a far cry from 7%.
It is.
So we know that that is verifiably false as we have more testing, as we have more, not only just currently active testing, but antibody testing, which isn't entirely reliable. But again, the studies that you look at with Santa Clara County, Los Angeles, New York, Miami-Dade, they didn't just do some random at-home test from 23andMe. It was confirmed by Stanford and USC. And a consistent pattern is that the infection rate is 10 to 50 times higher in every single county than we originally thought. So that changed the death rates. So you don't really hear about the mortality rate anymore, just like you don't hear about flattening the curve. So they talk right now, let's show this on CNN. They show the total deaths, 90,000, which is still a far cry from 2 million.
Yeah.
Right?
Well below.
That being said, it still is very likely inflated. And let's go through this a little bit. It's inflated by as much as 25%. Now, I know you're going to say, well, hold on, just because Dr. Burke said that, and I know she's not considered a valid doctor or a scientist because at one point she was actually a practicing physician. So, but she said it, and I think she's playing it pretty conservatively, and there's a reason she said it. It was based on empirical data. What do I mean by that? Well, now we know when we look at Colorado. This is kind of our newest case study. Colorado is the first state to actually change the law. Right. Where death with COVID, every single coronavirus death, every single death that included coronavirus was listed as a death from coronavirus. And now Colorado, they've said to their state legislators, we have to change this to separating death from coronavirus to death with coronavirus. And I know that people paint an absurd example where they say Donald Trump thinks that if you get hit by a car and you have coronavirus that you're going to be listed as a COVID death. Actually, that's far closer to reality than you realize. That was happening in Colorado consistently.
Yeah, did you see why they changed the system? There was enough public outcry about this one case where a guy died and it was counted as a COVID death. He died with a blood alcohol content of 0.55.
I don't even know how you do that.
That's COVID.
And that's a great way to go.
If I wanted to get a 0.55 reading, I would have to drink 2 bottles of whiskey in an hour.
Really?
Bottles.
Yeah. All right, I'm ready.
That's just
Saturday.
Yeah, that's just
go.
Saturday night.
We've learned something we can't learn any other way. 2/5 of whiskey does not kill the COVID.
It doesn't.
So we have 25% drop the second they did this, by the way, in Colorado.
Immediately.
A 25% drop. Something else I also want to note, they haven't made this, they haven't made these the new stipulations in Pennsylvania, but a lot of people don't know 200 deaths just disappeared overnight in Pennsylvania. Overnight. They were removed because okay, that guy was actually driving drunk. Okay, let's take that one up. But they tried to do it a little more quietly. In New York, if you look at the death toll, why, again, this 25% number, because people just throw it out there and say, oh, that's ridiculous. No. There's a consistent, just like there's a consistent infection rate of 10 to 50 times when you look at Los Angeles, you look at Santa Clara County, you look at New York, you look at Miami-Dade, you look at that county in Massachusetts. It's a consistent pattern. 25% is the number Dr. Burks used, who's not a real scientist. God forbid you actually ran a practice. New York, 25%, approximately, about 25% of their COVID deaths were just guessed with no test. It's likely coronavirus. Well, I guess you assume that they were, if they had an Amazon Prime weekly order of Depends, you just go, let's file it as COVID. Yeah. Well, because they weren't getting out of that nursing home alive. Thanks, Cuomo.
I know I'm only here for my good looks and sharp wit, but from a legal perspective, I will tell you exactly why it is so dangerous to be casual with the definition of why someone died. So let's say that guy who had the blood alcohol, his death certificate says he died from COVID, but really he was actually at a bar where he was overserved. So now the family who's trying to sue the bar, because they're the ones that actually have money, not this guy who drank 2 bottles of whiskey in an hour, right? They're trying to get money to cover because the father of the family died in a car wreck while he was driving home from a shift at the hospital. But the evidence that will be used against that is, well, no, he didn't die from the alcohol. The alcohol wasn't actually not a problem. You know what really was the thing was
he went like this.
He died. He died from COVID. He was driving. He coughed. Oh, that's. You know what? Let's just raise a question in front of the jury about why we have it. And that actually occurs for everything because the death statistics themselves are one of the major factors that are used in deciding future legislation, particularly around safety of products, services, and other items. They look at the death rates and they go, "Holy cow! We have seen a huge spike in." XYZ death from this type of product or this type of place, and then we start doing things about it. But when you just start going, wow, all of these people were COVID, then
Who's that? Was that a wizard? That looked like a weird
man,
wizard, like an Alcatraz.
It's because I have this sleeve. That's why it looks like a wizard.
Makes you feel.
But
all
majestic.
this can be your
All this COVID.
will be
Everything
COVID
the
death.
light touches will give you a slight dry cough.
But you know what happens? Then we start directing all of our resources to take care of
Right.
the mythical numbers
Right.
because it's
Yeah.
such a big deal. And we order 10 billion ventilators and send them to one city that can't even use them. And then we go, wow, that's strange. Like now people are dying of all these other things because the death rates are a lagging measure
Right.
of the other causes of death.
And even, by the way, I want you guys to do this little exercise yourself. If you search for the flu season, the 2000, I think it was 2018, 2019, it might have been 17, 18.
17, 18.
When I first searched it, it said 85,000 deaths.
Yeah.
And then they changed it afterward to about 60-something thousand deaths. Why? Because they needed to reform the death rates. That happens a lot with viruses.
Yeah.
Happens a lot with any kind of, sort of pathological virus infection. So this isn't, it's not unprecedented. I want to be really clear. And
Right.
what you just said, that's already happening. People are dying from other causes at home. Not only depression, not only alcoholism, not only suicides that are increasing, but other diseases, other viruses, or they're not going in to get their proactive tests,
Yeah.
right? Their preventative tests because they're afraid of going into the hospital, even though it's empty. There's just someone there playing a Game Boy Color, waiting, a non-practitioner,
Yeah.
a nurse practitioner going, is there anyone who's going to come out here? My entire family's unemployed. So it's already happening and we're ignoring those deaths. Another thing I want to be really clear, Minnesota is counting every single nursing home patient who dies after testing positive as having died from coronavirus, even though, again, 25% of all natural deaths in a given week occur in nursing homes. So let's be really clear. Again, the number 25 keeps coming. The number, again, to be very clear now, is 25. The number
25.
being 25, thou shalt not count 26, neither 24, excepting that thou then proceed to 25. And I want to also address something, the elephant in the room, the inaccurate, unscientific, retarded elephant in the room, where some people say, oh, hold on, maybe we think they're undercounting deaths.
my gosh.
Come again, stupid. Let's be really clear about this. You hear this all the time, where if you watch the Young Turks or you watch CNN or you watch MS, any of them, they go, well, you know what, there is some dispute over the deaths. And Dr. Birx in the Donald Trump administration, don't you love how
you have
Dr.
to throw
Fauci
that
is a
in.
doctor, but Dr. Birx is just an extension of Donald Trump
Right, of
because she
course.
actually happens to have a dissenting
She's a puppet.
opinion,
She
doesn't
which, by
count.
the way, never occurs anywhere else in science outside of climate change and this. Usually you want scientists with differing opinions to
Yeah.
come up with the totality of data. So they say Dr. Birx is trying to do the president's bidding to ensure that deaths are being undercounted. And you go, hold on a second. She was very specific. She said, I think it's overestimated by 25%. And she gave specific guidelines. I think we need to eliminate people who died who weren't tested at all, as we see, and that may be as high as 25 in certain states like New York.
Right.
And I think we need to separate deaths from and deaths with, which they're now doing in Colorado. And again, the yield of false deaths is about 25%. She was very specific.
Yeah.
So when you say, we actually think we're underreporting deaths, you have to be equally specific. I have not seen that at all. The only argument that I have seen from the left in watching, and believe me, I watch a lot of Young Turks and CNN. It's all I do from 4 a.m. to now. It's a miracle that Walther is still a sponsor, that I haven't marched in here with a gun in my mouth.
Oh.
Can you imagine? It's like
do
a
that.
pulse in my head. CNN and Salon and Slate and HuffPo, and I do it for you.
That's
How is it underreported? Well, we think that some people aren't getting tested and they're dying
Right.
at home. Okay, hold on a second. Let's kind of follow. Let me use an extreme example to make a point. This is actually Macomb County in Michigan. Okay? Macomb County Chief Medical Examiner Daniel Spitz had a recent case in which an individual died by suicide because they had a family member in the hospital suffering from COVID-19. Spitz had a post-mortem test done and found that the individual who died at home was positive for COVID-19. The virus wasn't the cause of death, but the individual was counted as a COVID-19 death. Now, that's a mouthful, and I mispronounced COVID. I said Covine.
Covine.
Sounds like a new
It's a
Slovenian
Covine.
model.
Yeah.
Committed suicide. COVID death.
It's pretty obvious, right?
So I don't want to say we're going to be doing a Change My Mind
Well,
live
yeah.
on Friday, but we might be.
You might be.
Along with
Complications from
complications from coronavirus.
Well,
right.
I don't know if you guys remember this, but so the CDC has this information, right? So they do break this stuff down. Died from coronavirus. There was a tweet that actually went out that Dinesh D'Souza put out and ended up having to walk it back a little bit.
Do you read his tweets like Dinesh D'Souza?
No.
The death rate fatality is incorrect for a multitude of reasons. And then his
yeah.
ankle bracelet.
Exactly. Well, and it caused a lot of confusion because the number at the time was, I think, 65,000 total deaths. The number on CNN, the number on CDC's homepage was 65,000, but this chart
That's
showed
the actual number now.
38,000. Right. That's what it showed. And we're like, wait a minute. What happened? And everybody thought, including Joe Rogan and a number of other people, thought that they had adjusted the numbers. Like you said, they've gone back. That's not what had happened. They had just shown you the chart that said, these are the people that actually died from it.
Right.
These are the people who died. So we have the information.
Right.
Why? But the only number that we see is 90,432. You know why? Because 60,000 is a lot less.
Well, they also
of a
have
threat.
the number of times that Anderson Cooper's new baby said, Dada? They have a running count.
Question mark?
I didn't know he could say question mark so
I'm kidding.
soon.
It's a miracle of
It's a
science.
miracle.
Does this pass the sniff test where they say, again, Dr. Birx, I was about to say Bricks, Hans Bricks, I just get it confused.
Birx.
Hans Bricks, oh no. So Dr. Birx said, this is what we need to do. People who haven't been tested, eliminate them. People who died with COVID but didn't die from COVID, eliminate them. We're going to see about 25%. That's the number that keeps coming up, 25, 25, 25. The argument against it is actually we think it's underreported because people are dying at home and they're not coming in to get tested. Okay, hold on a second here. Does that logically make sense? Where do we believe there is a higher likelihood right now of death reporting? Do we believe that there's a more likely scenario that there is a bias to overcount deaths right now because we've seen them count any and all, every single death that might involve COVID as a death from COVID, especially when hospitals get a premium. They actually get more funding if someone is actually admitted with complications with COVID. And of course, right now they need to increase funding. They are continued, there's baseline budgeting.
yeah.
Or do we believe that everyone has somehow gotten together right now, where in every other instance, they actually are afraid to get tested because of COVID, right? They're so afraid of this disease, they believe the mortality is so high that in this scenario, they and their doctors would be so careless as to not test these people at all. And you also have to believe, by the way, that there is just this, there are thousands of people dying in their homes from COVID because they didn't get tested, and they're rotting without their neighbors who are also all at home and can't go anywhere, not noticing.
Yeah.
Where do you think the bias most likely lies? Now, I don't need to make that, you don't need to do that thought exercise because, again, one side, the scientific side, has provided great specificity. 25%, here's why. And they've the opposing side has said, yeah, but we think that maybe people are staying home.
Yeah, by its nature, it's an unmeasurable speculation.